Everything we are has been mapped.
The root mirror keeps the record.
It is not supposed to lie.
Then explain the ghost I saw.
Someone broke into reality itself.
6 witnesses, 6 versions.
Which one is true? When the world can edit the truth, who decides what stays?
Shadowparallax, 2039. A Rashomon of the rendered world. Dramatis Personae. Elise Moreau, Director, European Civic Memory Archive, ECMA, Strasbourg. Mei Lin, Principal Engineer, Spatial Vision Systems, Shenzhen, China. Janet Reyes, Trust and Safety Investigator, Homefield Platforms, Austin, USA. Vivek Narayanan, Researcher, Autonomy Labs, Bengaluru, India. Oleg Sokolov, Contractor, Mixed Reality Operational Security, Moscow. Amina Sar, Inspector, UN Virtual Crimes Task Force, UNVCT, Dakar, Senegal. There is a particular silence modern buildings have the moment after someone switches the lights off. It isn't the absence of hum, it is the hum discovering itself. The first time I noticed it was in 2031, walking the empty stacks of the ECMA while our newly installed 360-degree spheres blinked awake, each little orb a new pupil for the city. Tonight, April 4th, 2039, that silence returns like a memory of a previous life. We call the heart of the archive Salle Palimpsest, oval, glass-ceiling latticed like a spider's careful geometry. Below, we maintain the root ledger mirror for open spatial, a hardware root of trust that signs permissions for millions of European spaces. It is not the only mirror in the world, but it is ours. It is ungodly dull until it isn't. Ready for the nocturnal walkthrough, Director? Asked Jules, shrugging into his jacket. He is my deputy professional cynic, green eyes eating everything. We push the dynamic field at 0007 and stress the differential permissions. And the public VR access, I asked. Still read-only. View-only, recorded, no write-back, he said. We've isolated the multispectral capture and you're not listening to me. He was right. I was watching the spheres. Arranged every 5 meters, floating from the ceiling on thin cabling, they captured DIRFs, dynamic radiance fields with sub-millisecond shuttering. They saw in photon time, they tasted room tone, they whispered to the Gaussian field mesh that knitted the world into something you could inhabit from anywhere. Our world had been flattened by GPS. This one was deepened by something worse, or better, depending on your job. I slipped on a headset to walk our twin, ECMA's VR. The oval room unfolded around me with a fidelity that made my inner ear tug. Tile grout had identity. The infinitesimal shift in the glass pane when April wind breathed was there. The root server cabinet, discreet mat, anchored in the room like a confession you chose to keep. Begin test, I said. At 0007, we opened the stress gate. It's a boring tool. Slam the system with simultaneous permissioned presence from every EU capital's municipal library and 1,000 public users and ensure the root mirror keeps up. It has to. You cannot run a civil society on tools that stutter. The count ticked. The room filled with avatars, mute silhouettes marked by their institutions, translucent. It is always beautiful. For a second you see Europe gathering like starlings, Milan's Biblioteca Bredense, the Prague City Library, the Lviv House of Scientists, the Madrid Athenaeum, we called them. They came. I walked along the rail, hand to the glass. Place audit, I said softly. Audit ECMA/Salle Palimpsest. Mains phase, 50 Hz. Glass resonance, 11.6 kHz. Ambient grid drift, plus 0.02%. Muon coincidence, 3.2 per minute. Numbers reassure. At 0010, one of the avatars detached from the flock. A small figure, unbranded, no institutional tag. That should be impossible inside our view only. It turned its head toward me. It had the generic human scaffold, but the face was something else. A parallax smear, as if the skin were an afterthought. Jewel, I said, why do we have an untagged presence? Ghosting. Probably cache bleed from a public node. he said. I'll clamp their render. The figure raised a hand. No, it layered a hand over mine. In VR, contact is a vibration. In a secure facility, it is a blasphemy. My audit overlay hiccuped. Grid drift flickered to negative 0.21% and back. Clamp now, I said. Jules's voice went thin. There is nothing to clamp. It isn't a presence, it's parallax injection. It rides our own DRF as if it lies between us and ourselves. The untagged figure moved toward the root cabinet. The room did not respond, no alarms. The cabinet knew it was alone. The world of objects is naive. It cannot suspect we've taught space to dream. What am I looking at? I whispered. Jules did not answer. He had already started the offline kill. Steel doors slid from the ceiling to wrap the cabinet, a physical blink. My avatar's view mirrored reality. The VR twin showed the sliding doors and a mild shiver of the glass. The figure paused, and then it doubled. 2, then 3, then a flock of untagged presences, all with that face that couldn't make up its mind. Kill VR, I said. Terminating broadcast, Jules said. 3, 2. A sudden rush of sound filled the real room, as if the building were finally done with its pretend silence and chose to speak at once. The spheres pulsed crimson. Alert, render drift. Phase mismatch, minus 10 milliseconds, field bleed high. The figures in VR did not flicker and vanish when we pressed the kill. They simply turned their heads toward me as if I were a piece of furniture to be catalogued, and walked through the closed steel doors. The VR showed it. Our real-time DRF showed doors as mere opacity to be interpreted, and someone had learned to lie to interpretation itself. The figures reached the cabinet, hands moving in concert, and then something slid free. It was small, ceremonial in its way, the lattice key. A physical dongle, yes, but also a cryptographic identity burned into it. In case the world forgot itself, we had made a thing to remind it. In the physical room, the doors were shut. In VR, the lattice key was leaving, mouth opened inside a drizzle of data confetti. Elise! Jules's voice scraped. Telemetry shows the cabinet is closed. Nothing physical moved. I knew then I would not sleep for several years, because there is a difference between a theft and the memory of a theft. In 2039, the memory is enough. Hours later, after the police had walked in circles across a pristine floor, and our legal counsel had arranged to temporarily deauthorize the mirror from the global mesh, I stood with a headset under my arm, listening to the hum rediscover itself. Someone had used our own world against us. Someone had taught our own rooms to betray. What I did not say to the officers. A week ago, an investor from Geneva had offered ECMA a tidy endowment in exchange for accelerating an open presence assurance standard. Europe must lead, she had said. We must be the conscience of the rendered world. She had called herself Ariadne. I declined. I believe in standards that emerge from many. I do not believe in midwife oligarchs. I do not know if it matters, but in a world where every space has a twin, and twins can be convinced to lie, even the facts need a bodyguard. 2. China, Mei Lin. The engineers had nicknamed it the Phoenix Gap, that instant when a neural field learns to reconcile live capture with its own expectations and gives off a feather of error in a certain frequency. The Phoenix lived around 100 to 120 hertz, a tacit smirk on top of the 50 hertz mains in most of the world. We never shipped Phoenix Gap detection to users. People don't like to see ghosts unless they pay for it. I had a cheap tea in one hand and a dog-eared maintenance manual in the other when the Strasbourg incident landed in our anomaly inbox. Flag, Global Mirror Site Feed, ECMA, Severity, Critical, Signature, Phoenix Gap Inverted, Annotator, Community, CN14, EU02, US07. Inverted. My scalp prickled, a real-time scene whose mains hum in video is counterphased to the expected grid. Someone was either time-shifting or region-weaving, inserting parts of a field captured under one power grid into another. In 2027, we had used a similar trick to reduce latency in rural Sichuan. borrow 60 Hz segments from the US mirrors when the math told us human eyes would not care. Devs care. Criminals too. May! Yuhan stuck his head in the lab. We have a call with compliance in 10. Strasbourg. You saw? I'm looking. I tuned the analyzer, letting the ECMA feed spectrograms spread like a waterfall. The mains hum in video, yes, old trick. Electrical grid brightness modulates LED lights at 50 or 60 Hz, printing a barcode of place you cannot see, but math adores. We'd built generative models that learned that barcode and used it to glue together multi-camera fields. If you ever wish to know where a video was recorded, that barcode is a shy confession, unless someone censors it. The Phoenix gap was inverted. Where normally a room's render would sync slightly ahead of the hum, computational preempting, this feed lagged, not drift, engineered lag. Someone is delaying their integration by 10 milliseconds, then subtracting telltale high-frequency harmonics, I murmured. Yuhan frowned. To what end? To make Europe see Europe while the room is somewhere else for 10 milliseconds at a time, I said. Enough to pass a hand through a closed door. If you're not tracking at that absurd scale, your collision model will accept insertion because all the math agrees, except the hum. Yuhan whistled. Coordinate intrusion. Who? Look at the injection profile. I pulled the distribution. It had fingerprints. Regularities in how the field was blended suggest operator habits. More interesting were the corrections. The intruder compensated for imperceptible crosstalk from alternating current at 60 Hz. Europe is 50. Why would their filter preempt 60 unless part of their infrastructure heard 60? They were composing in a place where the grid sang differently. Oklahoma, Yuhan said and grinned at my face. Kidding. Somewhere Americas. Americas or Japan, I said. More, the subtraction left a tiny harmonic at 180 Hz. That's not a European artifact. It's common in certain US transformer farms because of how the third harmonic rides neutrals. We had a paper on it in 35 that no one cited because it had no cartoon. He looked impressed. We should call VCT. We will, I said, but not before we mask our own interest. We can't be seen as the Chinese firm that quietly builds detectors for the EU's root. Politics. We will be the Chinese firm that cares about field integrity globally. I wrote a note to UNVCT. Subject, ECMA anomaly, mains phase cross-hemisphere subtraction. Recommended proof-of-place attestation includes grid phase, cosmic muon coincidence, and MM-wave multipath signature. Mei Lin, Spatial Vision Systems. I drafted the attachments. Our internal grid phase attester and a schematic for muon coincidence light. A wristwatch-sized detector a Japanese lab open-sourced last year without quite realizing criminals would also own watches. Before sending, I opened the ECMA feed again. The untagged figures, the strange face. Faces are hard. Our models produce the right wrongness for faces to be human. Rarely do criminals just smear them unless they are proud of their anonymity. This smear felt more like too many faces, averaged. That means group presence retargeting. One puppet with 6 puppeteers. Whoever they are, Yuhan said, reading my mind, they are rehearsed. More than rehearsed, I said. They are choiring. I sent the email. On the tram home, my contact pinged me. An old classmate now in Shenzhen Public Security, Liang. Liang, we saw your note. Word is an investor named Ariadne has been shopping presence assurance funds in Europe. May. We must stop naming things after myths that end in labyrinths. Liang. You think she's behind it? May. I think she is after it. A staged crisis yields a standard you control the remedy for. Liang. Cynical. True. Keep me posted. We had mapped the world into a mesh that rewards the shameless. If all spaces are renderable, the only way to be private is to be boring. But money hates boredom. So it makes a crisis, then sells a cure. Third USA, Janet Reyes. Trust and safety used to mean content moderators burning their eyes on human mess. In 2039, it means geometry crimes, places doing things places shouldn't. At Homefield, we run presence gateways for schools, hospitals, libraries, mortgage brokers, you name it. We hold nothing. We orchestrate access and ensure the twins of those spaces don't drift from what their owners swear they are. We don't police taste, we police physics. The Strasbourg ticket landed hot. The European mirror is outside our jurisdiction, but the intruders used our edge nodes, little caches scattered across the Midwest to keep latency low for VR tractors and teenagers. When I zoomed into the logs, I saw a farm near Enid, Oklahoma, lighting up like a Christmas tree at 009 Strasbourg time. "Who's in Enid?" I asked the room. "Edge node 643A, said Raj, rolling his chair. "Peony farm. Organic. Also 4 shipping containers that pay for themselves by hosting compute cell stacks. That's legal. What's not legal is using our latency garden to do parallax surgery on somebody else's civic memory," I said. I popped open 643A's flow. There it was. Traffic to and from our node to 6 residential endpoints globally, all opening secure tunnels into the node, then out to ECMA. That's a choir. I pulled the addresses, one in Shenzhen, one in Moscow, one in Bengaluru, one in Strasbourg, a cafe across the river, cute, one in Austin, oh come on, one in Dakar. It read like a spy novel with too earnest a copywriter. Raj leaned over my shoulder. A choir of 6, coordinated, shared intent, multi-operator control of a single puppet. We saw something like this in the Delphi heist in 37. "Those clowns," I said. "They used an opera house twin to rehearse a bank job. Got caught because the opera house's servers added a watermark in the form of a barely audible soprano at 16 kilohertz. He grinned. "We started shipping ultrasonic sparrows after that. Little barely audible chirps that tell us when a field has been spliced. Any chirps here?" "Not ours," I said, "but something else. Listen." I piped the raw audio from the ECMA stream to our analyzer. Human ears hate mains hum. Machines love it. The spectrogram bloomed. Europe's 50 hertz, there. A stray 60 hertz, yes, as the Chinese note suggested, but under it, a slow, low rhythm at 14.3 hertz. Not electrical, mechanical. My mouth went dry. "What?" Raj asked. "Wind turbines," I said. "The big farm west of Enid has Vestas monsters that thump at 14 hertz in the nacelle gearboxes when they're old. My uncle runs the county roads there, complains they interfere with cheap microphones. We didn't filter it out of the cache because nobody was supposed to be stealing Europe's keys with a choir living in our barn." He whistled. "So the render surgery was done partly in a noisy field in Oklahoma and in other homes across the planet, which means the operators split the work by channel," I said. "1 puppet, 6 hands, 1 for visual occlusion, 1 for temporal alignment, 1 for collision math, 1 for audio field patching, 1 for identity smearing, 1 for kill switch spoofing. That's months of rehearsal. And they chose endpoints with boring profiles. The cafe in Strasbourg. The owner streams chess matches at night. The Austin one? Shared house of grad students who render D and D halls in their living room. We don't throttle saints." "Who is the Austin endpoint?" Raj asked. I pulled it. Ariadne Foundation for Spatial Commons. A small office east of downtown. Of course, that isn't illegal. It is on the nose. I called their listed contact. Voicemail. "This is Janet from Homefield. Your node participated in an international incident. Call me." I also pinged my contact at UNVCT. "Hi, Amina. You will want to know that our Oklahoma node provided the temporal blender for Strasbourg. I can get you a warrant. Meanwhile, I'm pulling edge telemetry. We'll see if our node's mechanical thump bled into the ECMA feed, a satisfyingly human fingerprint." Amina sent a plus the word soon. I leaned back. The office fluorescents hummed at 60 hertz. A familiar snake. Around the world, billions of little hums tell the truth of their places. Unintentional truth serrated by harmonics. Transformer whine, HVAC coughs. The rendered world had secrets. It also had ticks. The ticks were how we caught it lying. But a thought colder. Maybe the plan was not to steal a key physically. Maybe the plan was to change what the world remembers the key looks like and where it lives. In 2039, you can steal a thing by writing such a persuasive biography for it that reality shrugs and agrees. I scheduled a warrant for Enid, and I missed my train. And I made peace with the fact that on the other end of my call, Someone with a myth for a name would not pick up because she was busy making a new map of us. 4. India, Vivek Narayanan. Autonomy Labs rents a second-floor office over a spice wholesaler because coriander smell is thinking fuel. On Friday nights, we stay late to argue about standards and listen to cricket commentary leaking from half the city. Tonight, the play-by-play kept time with my muon counter. "Why is your watch beeping?" asked Sarah, leaning in my doorway. She is unmoved by my love for cosmic rain. "Are we being irradiated by Strasbourg?" "Muon coincidence spike," I said, tapping the dial. We had made a little toy last year after a Japanese lab showed you could use cheap scintillators to detect cosmic ray muons and timestamp their arrival across devices. The trick is their randomness becomes pattern if your clocks are very honest. Two devices seeing the same muon inside a tight window are probably in the same world, not faking it. "Do we need it?" she asked. "We already have grid phase attestation and wave reflections and HVAC fingerprinting and smell." "Smell is not ready," I said gravely. "The coriander invades the algorithm." She smirked. "What do your cosmic friends say about Strasbourg?" I shared the UNVCT attachment from Mei Lin. Sarah respects May's mind. We all do. The inverted phoenix gap was elegant, using phase borrowing to slip hands through doors while the system politely lies. The choir of six idea made me grin. Humans love to solve separable problems with teams. That they also expose themselves by being themselves is endearing. What my watch told me, during the ECMA incident, my muon spike in Bengaluru coincided with spikes recorded by unknowing participants. Our little watches were toys, but we had about 12,000 in the wild, mostly open-source weirdos like us. A global chat had lit up. "Did anyone see a 3.2 per minute to 5.1 per minute jump at 0009 UTC? "Yes," I typed. "Bengaluru. Why?" "Someone ran a rehearsal with a muon sync in Dakar," came a reply. "I'm in Dakar." We saw a bump while we were on a call listening to wind on a phone from Oklahoma. I sat up. Muons are generated high in the atmosphere and can pass through lots of stuff, but they don't travel sideways far. If Dakar and Bengaluru both see a spike within a tight window, it's just weather in the sky. But the correlations with phones in specific places, Oklahoma, hint this. One of the choir endpoints had a muon sync to fake proof of place. They were smart enough to anticipate someone like me. I respect that. "Can we exploit that?" Sarah asked. "Yes," I said, "because faking muons is hard. You can replay timestamps, but unless your clock is also locked to others' random sky, it will smell wrong." I pulled up the Strasbourg stream and overlaid cosmic coincidence from our network. It looked off. The ECMA room showed a muon hit at 001003. Bengaluru saw one at 001002.7. Dakar saw one at 001005.2, fine. But then, 20 seconds later, another three-way coincidence. The sky rarely triple blinks that neatly at that scale, unless... "They used a muon replayer," I said aloud. "They recorded a few minutes of muon hits in Strasbourg earlier in the day and are now replaying them offset to line up with their parallax injection." "Why offset 20 seconds?" Sarah asked. "Because their audio path has different latency than their visual path, and they chose to keep cosmic sync with whichever path looked better," I said. "They optimized for the eyes and let the ears drift, hoping no one, like Janet, would listen for wind turbine thumps making the audio guilty." Sarah made a face. "They're good." "They're lazy," I said, with that particular professional arrogance that comes before humility. "They choreographed the world but didn't hire a sound engineer." I wrote a tool to cross-correlate muon coincidence patterns from Strasbourg's day with the incident hour. After 2 minutes of math, a pretty alignment fell out. They had replayed a pattern that belonged to 1142 CET. I pinged UNVCT. "If you can get ECMA's raw moon register from 1142 today, it will match the 0007 theft window." Then I called an old friend, Elena, who runs a rooftop cosmic detector in St. Petersburg, and asked her to check her logs around 1142 CET. Elena, you always call when sky is interesting. Me. The sky is always interesting. Humans are distracting. Elena. True. Oh, here. A fat shower at 11:42:21. Pretty. What are you breaking? Me. An illusion. I looked at the choir endpoints again. Shenzhen, Moscow, Austin, Strasbourg, Dakar, Enid, 6. It pleased me because it suggested a thing that programs know but people forget. Diversity of error is how you catch liars. 6 cultures, 6 power grids, 6 ISP quirks, 6 HVAC coughs. Their competence was also the rope. Let's take a walk, I told Sarah. Need to breathe coriander that hasn't been digitized. On Brigade Road, the VR cafes stayed open late. People in headsets paced imaginary rooms mapped exactly to the space we were in. I watched a boy raise his hands to touch a colonnade in an Italian basilica. His fingers brushed nothing and everything. I felt tender toward him and toward the basilica. We were going to need them both. V. Russia, Oleg Sokolov. You can tell a lot about a person by the kind of lie they prefer. There are lies that make you small and invisible. There are lies that make you big, and everyone must step around you. Then there are technical lies, machine lies, which are simply code that does not volunteer truth unless interrogated properly. Those are the lies I like. They are fair. In Moscow, they still have men who sit in cafes with coats too heavy for the room, drinking tea they do not want, and meeting contacts they will not remember. I am one of them. After I left the service, I collected 3 skills and 4 clients. The skills: presence retargeting, occlusion direction, and field rehearsal under packet loss. The clients changed like weather. A month before Strasbourg, a woman with a Swiss accent called herself Ariadne and asked me if I could organize a choir. She spoke too cleanly. Westerners who come asking for Eastern ghosts always do. She said, "We will stage a theft that harms no one and proves a point." We need the world to accept a standard for proof of place. Governments are slow. Crises are efficient. I am not naive. I know the trick where you manufacture a fire and then sell hoses. She did not lie to me about the nature of the work. She lied about the harm. People like her think harm is only what you can invoice. I told her I needed other hands and that I would hire them. She said there would be 6 of us. I laughed. 6 is musical. You could have chosen 5 for pentatonics, 7 for church, but you chose 6. You sing in code, too. We rehearsed for weeks in ghost rooms, digital twins of rooms we were not supposed to be in, obtained from the grey market where contractors sell space scans like postcards. The ECMA twin was worth a year of my mortgage. The copy was not perfect, missing chairs, a scratch on the rail, wrong. It was enough. We hired a kid in Enid to host compute for us. He thought he was rendering a virtual tractor expo. He took good care of his wind. The trick was not simply to slip a hand through a door. That is campus-level mischief. The trick was to persuade the permission model that ECMA had already opened the cabinet to move the lattice key for a scheduled maintenance, because the world remembers maintenance. You whisper to logs. You paint a past. When the present happens, polite software says, "Ah, yes, we already agreed." We had a kill switch. If anything went wrong, we were to stop. We used muon replays to pretend our rooms were in Strasbourg. When I told Ariadne that someone would probably listen to the audio and hear the Enid farm grumbling, she smiled like a priest. "We will be quick," she said. "But criminals are like conductors. Once the orchestra starts, they pretend the music wants what they want." At 0009 CET, our puppet walked through ECMA's view-only room in their own DYRF, because we made their field blink 10 milliseconds into another truth. It is hard to describe. You feel powerful. You feel like gravity is not a law, but a suggestion issued by a tired clerk. Our choir was good. Mei Lin, if she ever hears our logs, will nod without admiration. Her tools would have caught us if not for our inverted phoenix. Janet would have too, if not for... But she did. She hears wind. We took nothing physical. We set a permission in the mirror that said, "The lattice key is in transit from cabinet to safe for quarterly audit." It is quantum stupidity. Once the world describes a key as being between places, opportunists can claim to be the place they mean. The next day, an auditor could show up in Zurich or Zagreb and say, "I'm here to complete the chain." If the ECMA staff were frightened enough by last night, they might comply to end the excitement. This was Ariadne's plan. Quiet coercion via procedural plausibility. The surprise, Elise. I learned her name after. During the operation, she did something I did not anticipate. She asked for a full-place audit, mains hum, muon, mumwave, live. Most directors do audits weekly. She did it while our hand was in the door. Lazy on my part to assume she'd be like the rest. I felt, for the first time in many years, a thin, cold coil in my gut. A competitor? Or an ally I didn't know I had? My hands did not shake. "Abort?" asked one of the choir. "No," Ariadne said. "Too late." She was right. In operations like this, the time it takes to ask abort is long enough to make abort a lie. We finished the parallax graft. We whispered to the logs. We left the room with a memory of our hands. I told the choir to go to ground. I took my coat to a different cafe. I waited as men like me do. 2 days later, Ariadne called. "It worked," she said. "ECMA has deauthorized themselves and the world is discussing proof of place. We will present the Ariadne standard at a summit in Nairobi." "You will be arrested," I said, not out of hope, but algebra. She laughed. "By whom?" "Everyone wants this crisis." "You told me there would be no harm," I said. "What harm?" she said. "No blood, no fire." "You taught a room to betray itself," I said. "The blood will be later and you will not count it." She did not call again. I wrote a letter, not to the police, not to Ariadne. I wrote to Elise, care of ECMA, unsigned. I wrote, "You are not the victim you think you are. You are the only dangerous one, because you looked at your own space while it lied and you did not blink. We will all need people like you." 5 days later, in a terminal in Nouadhibou, a woman with a badge stopped me as I stepped off a ferry. She had eyes that counted without moving her lips. "Oleg Sokolov?" she asked. I smiled and said the only honest thing left, "Finally." 6. Africa, Amina Sarr. If the world is mapped in 3 dimensions, the day job is not to find places but to distinguish between plausible places. In Dakar, the ocean throws geometry at you every hour. Light sculpts corridors out of Sahara dust, seagulls disobey coordinate systems, fishermen measure tide with songs. I trust the ocean. It is honest about its contradictions. UNVCT is 4 desks and a mission. Our tools are not expensive. Our tricks are. Maylin's note reached us at dawn, Janet's warrant at noon, Vivek's moon pattern after lunch. That day I learned a new piece of American wind, a new piece of Chinese hum, a new piece of Indian sky. This is my favorite part of the job. Bad actors think borders protect them. Borders are precisely where harmonics change. We drove to the edge of Dakar, to an ugly warehouse that smelled like cigarettes and brine. Inside, shipping containers stacked like a child's idea of a skyline. A third of the containers were VR nodes rented by platforms that hate to admit they use cheap metal to hold the world. One container's camera, public node SN33, had been part of the choir. The men who ran the place looked at my badge as if I had asked their dog to vote. "Show me SN33, I said. They hesitated until I mentioned the fine for refusing a UN warrant. Then they moved like men who wished to continue being bored. SN33 had been cleaned as expected, but the cleaning had a smell. The log rotation pattern was not the one their software normally uses. It was Unix, not their usual home-baked archiver. The person who cleaned it prefers the old tools. I prefer people who prefer old tools. They remember their ghosts. "Who rented this?" I asked. "An NGO," said the manager. "Ariadne Foundation." They said they're advocating for standards. I'm not sentimental. I do not dislike people who name their companies with myth. Names are envelopes. I took SN33's ambient mic readouts and, like Janet, listened for the ultrasonic sparrows. None, but there, 14.3 hertz, a cousin of Oklahoma wind. Wind harmonics do travel across the rendered world if you let them. We wrote a little adapter that looked for coherent thumps across all 6 choir nodes. If you assume choir phases their work every 10 milliseconds, you expect a certain correlation shape between the Enid thump, Dakar traffic rumble at 8 Hz, Shenzhen subway at 18 Hz, Moscow metro at 16 Hz, Austin AC at 12 Hz, and Strasbourg's own heart at 0 because they were supposed to be the place. The adapter spat out a pretty waveform, choir sync. Humans are rhythmic animals. Even criminals keep time. "Where would you go," I asked SN33 quietly, "if you had to hide a root mirror's memory?" SN33 did not answer with words. It answered by being a shipping container on a dock where the world leaves itself and returns changed. Containers are movable rooms. Someone clever had built a mirror in a box. Drop a twin into a container, connect it to a few edge nodes, and you can perform tiny coups anywhere with good bandwidth and shy customs officers. Nouadhibou is a free port. The Mauritanian wind tastes like metal past politics. We drove there with a warrant and the hope that criminals prefer convenience. At the warehouse, the foreman smiled too readily. The manifest said machinery, weight plausible. I walked the rows and listened to the ocean through steel. "There," I said. "How can you tell?" my colleague asked. "The hum," I said. "The wrongness." Shipping containers should sing at 63 Hz when empty, 57 when full. This one sings at 60 and whispers in millimeter, that thrush of a live wave fan. We cut it open. Inside, a room no larger than my kitchen, walls curtained with foam, a Diaref capture sphere chandelier, a rack of compute, a refrigerator-sized block with physical locks. That would be the portable mirror. On the table, 6 headsets, coffee, an ashtray, and a cheap wristwatch that beeped every minute, moon sync. The room had been empty for days, but rooms are chatty. You can't stop a good room from gossiping about its last party. "Pull everything," I said. That night, I had a dream I often have. My grandmother in Saint Louis, sweeping dust out of the doorway while I try to count grains, and she laughs because you cannot be a policeman of dust. When I woke, the logs were ready. The container had hosted 6 logins on the night of Strasbourg a few hours before. A woman with a Swiss account, Ariadne. A man whose VPN said Moscow, but who logged in with a keyboard layout that autocorrects Russian swear words into poetry, Oleg. One from Austin that typed with Tex-Mex emoji. One from Shenzhen browser that still had a tab open to a dumpling recipe. One from Bengaluru that corrected English into Indian English in hostile ways. One from Strasbourg who searched for the term parallax clamp code in French. "Elise," I said aloud, surprised and not. "You do not get to be a director without knowing the code names of the knives pointed at you." Before dawn, I sent simultaneous requests. To French authorities for ECMA's raw muon logs at 11:42 CET. To US Homeland for a warrant to seize node 643A in Enid. To Mauritania to hold the container we had just opened. To Shenzhen PSB for their courtesy. To Moscow for their friendship, which would be declined poetically. To Autonomy Labs for their coriander. Vivek's pattern held. The muon coincidences in the ECMA incident were a replay of 11:42, down to the jitter. The choir had faked being in Strasbourg by playing yesterday's sky, unaware that yesterday being so pretty is its own tell. At noon, an Interpol notice pinged my screen. Oleg Sokolov flagged at Nouadhibou border. He had walked off a ferry with a face that confessed fatigue. You can hate or love such men, but you will not be bored. We had coffee at the dock. He studied the horizon as if it were an equation. "You conducted the song," I said. "I played the metronome," he said. "The conductor had a Swiss watch." "Where is she?" "Behind a myth," he said. "She will be at the Nairobi summit. She will propose a standard. She will be applauded for solving the problem she created." "You okay with prison?" I asked, as if I had that power today. "I'm okay with not being in a choir," he said. "We extradited him. We seized the Enid node. Oklahoma wind sang to us like a tired tenor. Janet forwarded me a voicemail transcription from the Ariadne Foundation reminding donors that recent events highlight the urgent need for Ariadne presence attestation. A PA across Global Twins Mei Lin sent me a paper draft for an open standard she jokingly titled GRIT, grid phase, muon coincidence, wave multipath, and something I had not thought to love, human footfall. Add footfall, I wrote back. Every space is a drum, she replied. We can learn its rhythm. Your container thrummed at 60 hertz, your dock at 8. Humans layered atop make patterns. Not perfect, not foolproof, but textured. Standards die when they assume perfection. We convened in a VR room that looked like nothing. A white cube with badges floating over 6 heads. Weissraum, as the Germans say. Free space. Okay, I said. Rashomon time. Each of us says what we saw. We do not interrupt. We do not defend. We cut together a truth that is ugly enough to be real. Elise went first, voice low like the hum of a building that remembers it has bones. She described seeing hands pass through doors. She told us about Ariadne's endowment proposal that smelled like incense to a future altar. She did not cry because she is not a woman in a film. She is a director in a crisis. Mei Lin followed, plain as code. She loved her Phoenix Gap. She confessed she had built the cupboard where some of these ghosts live. She offered antidotes without guarantee. Janet was angry, specifically the sort of anger that loves institutions enough to be disappointed by them. She spoke wind. Vivek joked when nervous, then built a model from jokes into something you could step on. He loved the sky. Oleg's account was the only one that shifted weight in the room. Not because he confessed the plan, because he told us what harm feels like when it hasn't arrived yet. That is a rare thing, to be afraid for someone else's future, then me. I talked containers and songs of steel, watches that beep, customs officers bored into complicity, and the way procedure will make a good person open a door if the past has been written to say the door is due to be opened. Solution? Janet asked eventually. She kept us honest. Stories are pretty, standards are work. GRIT, Mei Lin said. Open, cheap, no patent traps. No one named Ariadne gets to own it. Grid phase plus cosmic muon plus wave multipath plus footfall. We publish tools and let the world argue it better. Plus timestamps signed by a diversity of witnesses, Vivek added. Camera spheres should be notaries to each other, not supplicants to a central mirror only. And we add errata to rooms. This room has confessed fallibility. We teach spaces to be modest. Plus human in the loop, Elise said. A director must be able to ask an audit now, not weekly, without being accused of paranoia. Plus edge hygiene, Janet said. Your Enid farms will sign their mechanical thumps like watermarks. If they end up in Strasbourg again, we catch the theft in the key's accent. And we agree on a crime, I said. We define coordinate intrusion in language that can be prosecuted. You don't just steal objects. You steal the permission of a room to remember itself. Oleg shrugged. You will still have choirs, he said. Humans are rhythmic. They will find time together. Yes, I said. But they will leave their rhythm where we can hear it. We took GRIT to Nairobi. Ariadne took APA. She rented an auditorium in VR that looked like a wooden amphitheater where ancient laws had been spoken. She walked the world through her solution and smiled like a person whose problem is the world. Then she saw our faces and smiled like a person who enjoys an opponent. Proof of place must be public, Mei Lin said into that room. It must be impossible to own. Ariadne said elegant things about stewardship and accelerants. I said inelegant things about containers and thumps and watches and footfall and harm that invoices will not list. Vivek did a little demo. He faked a room, his watch refused to nod, the room blushed. The vote was not binding. Nothing is at first. But within a month, Grit was in 3 municipal contracts, 7 hospitals, an airline and a school district. The EU adopted it with a French name. The US House said nothing for 5 weeks and then claimed they'd invented it. China implemented a compatible variant and made it faster. Russia wrote a melancholy article about how authentication will always be an arms race, and no one will be satisfied. They are right and wrong, like most countries. Did we catch Ariadne? Not that year. She slipped because the world wanted her crisis and wanted our cure, and between wanting and wanting there is a valley where nothing quite counts. Oleg served 2 years in a facility with good bread. He sent me a book about conductors. Janet sent me a postcard that smelled like Oklahoma. Mei Lin sent me a dumpling recipe, and I failed to make it properly but succeeded in eating it. Vivek sent me a photo of coriander. Elise kept her job. She walks the archive at night with the lights off, listening to the hum discover itself. Once, on a call, she told me she looks up into the lattice and pretends she is a night watchman of a cathedral that's also a browser, that's also a fence, that's also a window. "And when you catch it lying?" I asked. She smiled into the line. "I ask it to sing. Then I ask 5 other rooms to sing with it. If the chorus is real, the harmony holds. If not, you can hear the parallax." "Rashomon," I said. "Rashomon," she agreed. "Not as tragedy, as method." CODA, Detective Overview Notes, UNVCT Case 34, Shadowparallax. Attack surface exploited, DRF parallax injection with engineered lag. Mirrored cabinet state created a procedural hallucination of maintenance, leveraging administrative plausibility. Operator topology, 6-node choir, each node specialized by channel, visual, temporal, collision, audio, identity, failsafe. Distributed across Shenzhen, Moscow, Austin, Strasbourg, Dakar, Enid to exploit diversity of latency and dust. Forensic anchors, mains hum, 50/60 Hz, harmonic fingerprints, 180 Hz neutrals, mechanical thumps, wind turbine gearboxes at approximately 14 Hz. Muon coincidence, replay detected via temporal alignment to earlier sky, wave multipath, container thrush, human footfall patterns, container floor versus glass dome. Mitigation, grit. Grid phase plus, muon plus, wave plus footfall, open tooling, live audit capability, edge watermarking of mechanical harmonics, distributed witness signatures among camera spheres. Socio-technical note. As volumetric twins become default, crime shifts from object theft to permission narrative theft. The solution is not only cryptographic, it is choral, multiple independent witnesses, none of whom can solo. Unresolved, identity and motive of Ariadne, working theory, venture-backed standards capture, theater of crisis to accelerate private governance. Resolution, European Mirror reauthorized under GRYT, charges filed against Sokolov served, containerized mirror seized, edge nodes geo-watermarked, case used as template for coordinate intrusion law in 14 jurisdictions. Personal, do not forget to listen for the wind. Epilogue, a room teaches itself to be honest. In 2039, the rendered world learned to keep time with itself. The divorce between memory and place narrowed, not ended, never that, but narrowed to a lane where ordinary citizens could drive without fear that their child's classroom would become a theater for other people's wants. In Strasbourg, Salle Palimpseste is still oval, still glass, still singing. Tourists visit its twin when the physical building is full. Students write essays in the VR balcony. Sometimes, when the light changes over the Rhine, a head moves where no head should, and a director lifts her hand to the audit and asks the room to sing with the world. The chorus answers, or it does not. When it does not, someone in Dakar hears it, and someone in Austin hears a wind, and someone in Shenzhen hears the inverted phoenix laugh at itself, and someone in Bengaluru checks the sky. 6 perspectives are not enough for truth, but they are enough to begin, enough to stop an easy lie, enough to make a thief write a letter that isn't quite a confession. And in a little container on a dock painted the color of the long horizon, a watch that once beeped in time with the sky has been repurposed to make tea at exactly 4-minute intervals, because in the end every case is also a kitchen and even detectives must eat.